Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and humanoids of all ages, and welcome back to another podcast here with the Giant. Today, my other host, the Hobbit, is currently unavailable. I've not been able to get in touch with her, so it will just be me in your presence until she turns up at some point. I'm sure she's on a long road, trying to get somewhere and trying to get back. So, without further ado, what are we talking about today? It is the Irish famine of 1841 to 1851. There was an earlier famine that did have an effect on Ireland as well, but I figured to focus on this because it had one of probably the biggest effects in Ireland due to the famine, due to a famine in particular, in which point, as you can see on the map that's next to me, we lost about 20%, 25%, they reckon, of the Irish population back during that time period. And there was a lot of different things going on. There was, they reckon about 1.5 to 2 million people left either died or fled the country to go to America, to England, over to the English common countries, because at that time Ireland was a part of the UK and part of the Commonwealth. It was run by the British, and there were Irish representatives that were mainly Protestant in a Catholic country, because Ireland at the time, there was 80% of the Irish were Catholics, and during the period where the English took over, which was in the 1801, they pushed forward for reform, so the Catholics couldn't vote, they couldn't buy land, they weren't allowed within 4 miles of a corporation town, they weren't allowed to go to school, they weren't allowed a lot of rights. So the majority of the Irish people were kind of screwed basically. They just had no options, and it didn't. So all they could do would be to work on the farms for the landowners that would own huge swathes. I believe there was one report of one lord owning 40,000 acres, which, to put that in perspective for you, is 240 kilometres squared. So you go 240 kilometres, that whole square was owned by him. And I believe he was the biggest owner of land in Ireland. But this just tells you how much control the top had against the poorer class, and the poorer class didn't really have much options. So to give you a bit of background, Ireland signed the Union Agreement in 1801. There were protests, and there were people that were trying to fight this and trying to get rights for Catholics, and were trying to how to say it, and they're trying to mitigate between being run by the UK and also holding some of their rights so they can actually do things. But unlimitedly that fell through, and the Catholics got no rights. They didn't get conceded anything at all. And sorry. So, fast tracking, the lords that ran over Ireland weren't generally there. They mostly lived and resided in England, so they were what would be known as satellite lords. So they would be off there. They'd have their men collecting taxes, and they would have middlemen that would collect taxes, give it to the landowners, and they'd just be collecting money that way. And they'll just be gaining money, they'll be shipping out food. And during the famine, the first year, there was a report of 4,000 ships going from Ireland to England transporting food. So this would have been, carrots, not potatoes of course, but carrots, I'm trying to think of fruit and veg that's not from other countries, apples, probably plums, you're talking, spinach, you're talking peas, all of the fresh fruit and veg that is grown and that has been grown in Ireland, and corn as well. Corn was a big one. All of this was being shipped out of Ireland to the UK to feed the UK, and at this point in time, England held half of the world, and they were the wealthiest country at that time. So they were doing fine. They were absolutely wealthy, and the Irish people were not. They were very poor, very, very poor. And they were struggling to survive because they were only given a measly amount of land to grow their food. So again, potatoes are one of the highest yielding crops out there, because you plant one, you get like 30 or 40 out of them. So it's great yield for cost effectiveness. So that worked out really great for them, until the fact that until the famine happened, which caused potatoes to die. And at this point, the famine wasn't just secluded to Ireland; it was happening all across Europe. It was widespread. So England, France, Spain, Portugal, Switzerland, Germany, Belgium, they were all going through the same crisis of their potato crops were dying. But they all had other crops available, so they had all the other food, whereas Ireland didn't. And this is the major thing that led to the death of so many Irish people, was because they only had this crop to eat, because all of the other food was being shipped off to England and they weren't allowed to have it. Now, before the famine began to get worse and worse, lords and people realised it's not going good. This is getting pretty bad, and there had been a famine before, I believe back in 1815. I'll have to double check the dates, but around that time there was a famine. Wasn't as bad as this one, but it was still pretty bad. But at that time, it was a 2-year famine. They closed off all the ports. They kept the food in Ireland for the Irish people to eat, which made it a lot easier for them to keep the Irish population alive, and for people to get back on their feet and start working again. Now there was the superintendent of Ireland. He was basically the guy who ran the entirety of Ireland. And you had mayors, you had lords, and a couple of them came out, look, things are getting bad. Like, food's beginning to get short. Like, stuff's going on. We need to close the ports. We need to keep the food in Ireland. We need to stop shipping to England. We need to feed these people to keep them alive. Because at that time there were a height, I believe, of around 9 million. I'm just going to check that. Because I believe it's 9 million. Just been doing a little bit of research. Population. But yes, I believe it was around the 9 million mark. Well, basically, the Irish population had gotten big. Like, it was growing exponentially. And then once the Irish famine hit, they reckon it's anywhere between 800,000 to 1.5 million people dying. And the reason why this is the case is because birth and death statuses, requesting all this hadn't been in place yet, and what they did in 1851, they did a count, and so basically they asked people to do a survey to say, have any of your family members passed, how many, but the issue with this is that sometimes whole households died, or whole towns died or fled, and so there were so many people that were unaccounted for. And they reckon it was about the 250 to 300,000 people died of starvation, and the rest died of diseases and diseases related to malnutrition. There we go. And that was the case because a lot of diseases, which if you were healthy and you were fit, you'd be more likely to survive, and you could regain and bounce back, like such things like fevers, colds, diarrhea, dysentery, and trying to think of some other ones. Cholera, I think cholera. And cholera is due to the fact that because a lot of the serfs got kicked off the land at the time, because poor serfs were costing the landlords money, because anyone earning under £4 had to be subsidised by the landlords. So the landlords kicked loads of them out. They all went to the workhouse. Workhouses were packed and crammed. A lot more diseases and illnesses spread because of that issue, because there's lots of people in one place. And sorry. And so because you're weak and you're malnutrition, you haven't got enough strength, you get ill, you die. Like, people were getting whooping cough, they were getting smallpox, they were getting chickenpox even. They were just getting, I'm trying to remember the other one that was quite a good one. But they were getting these illnesses because of unsanitariness, close spaces, little to no food, and basically they were watching this food leave Ireland, and they were just going like, we're starving, like, there's nothing for us. And nope, if you haven't got any crops, you die. And just gonna put up some other facts, because there's some really amazing stuff. So there was a government in place at the beginning of the famine in Ireland that was run in the UK by the Prime Minister at the time, whose name was Peel. Here we go. No, we don't want the analysts. We want. I'm just going to grab a fact here because it's quite an interesting fact. Although there is some interesting stuff about charities which will come up. Yeah, here we go. So at the start of the famine, in the less severe phase, it was prompt and successful. So the government was doing a good job. They saw the issue was coming up. They went, okay, right, let's do a few things. And so there's widespread crop failure in November 1945, and so Prime Minister Sir Robert Peel, he's an interesting character. He purchased £100,000 worth of maize from the US, but this was a secret deal because he didn't want people to know that he was doing this donation to help people out, because that would undermine him, it would seem. So he got this sent over to America. There was a few delays, but it eventually got there. And so yeah, it's beginning of February 1946, so it took a whole year for them to get the transport shipment over, but that's pretty good. The only issue is that they were of unground kernels, this maize, and it needed more processing, it needed more work done to it to make it edible, and very few mills were able to process it and to get it shipped out, basically. So it took a long time, and it took a long time. And also the other issue with cornmeal could be consumed. It had to be very much cooked again, or you could have severe bowel complaints, which, if you're suffering from a famine, that's not good, because you're losing more of your nutrition, so you're losing more of what you've got inside you, keeping you alive. So you're going to be, you've got more likely to die. But it was a push in the right direction. It was okay. Yeah, this is making sense. Like, you got it. But it was and then it was initially unpopular because of this, and it was known as Peel's brimstone. So okay. Now, in October 1945, he was trying to remove the corn laws and tariffs on grain, which kept the price of bread artificially high. So there was tariffs on the production and on grain. So the local Irish person, you're kind of buggered. Basically, you're not going to have much of luck. Getting a nice loaf of bread in and enjoying that, basically. So he tried to get this removed so he could create some benefits for people, but it was opposed, and it was basically because he was part of the Conservative Party in the UK at the time, and a majority of his cabinet members were like, no, we do not like this plan. We do not like what's going on here, because it's going to cost us money, because we're going to lose out on cost, because a lot of these lords at the time would have had a stake in Ireland. They would have had land, they would have had produce being grown, they would have been making money off the sales. There probably would have been merchants there, that they were getting money from on the side. So they were like, we don't want this. So no. So he resigned the premiership in December, but the opposition was unable to form a government, and he was reappointed. Great. In March, he set up a programme of public works in Ireland. So what this would do is this would allow the Irish people to get jobs, to work, to earn money for doing jobs that would benefit Ireland. It's a win-win situation, because they're getting necessary work done, and people are getting paid. It will help the issue, because everything's going to go right, because you create better routes, and you create better trains, then more supply and more movement, sort of thing. It's pretty good. But so the famine worsened in 1946, and the repeal of the corn laws in that year did little to help the starving people. So it looks like in the end he managed to push through the corn law repeal, but because people were so poor at that point, they couldn't afford the bread. So you're kind of buggered there anyway. So the measure to do the public works in Ireland split the Conservative Party, leading to the fall of Peel's ministry. So on the 25th of June, the second reading of the government's Irish coercion bill was defeated by 73 votes in the House of Commons by a combination of Whigs, Radicals, Irish repealers, and Protestants, Conservatives. Peel was forced to resign Prime Minister on 29th of June. So he came in, he couldn't get where he wanted to pass, and he had to go. And this is where things get a bit more unpleasant. So we had Lord John Russell assume the seat of office. So Russell's methods and Russell's ideas to help fix this problem were wholly inadequate. They weren't working, and so they were influenced by the doctrine of laissez-faire. So I believe the market would provide the food needed, and they refused to intervene against food exports to England, then halted the previous government's food and relief work. So this left a lot of people, hundreds of thousands of people without any work, money or food, because the government was providing aid, but they're like, no, you don't get any more aid. No, we're done with you. You guys, you'll survive. If you don't, it's your own fault. And so basically, they didn't really assume it was going to be as bad as it was. Or the other thing as well is they didn't care. For one thing, the English never liked the Irish because they were right there next to them, sort of thing. They're their own country, hence why they invaded, hence why they took them over. But there's so many like little things in there, just kind of like, well, this famine it's the will of God. It's their own fault that they're dying. It's like, hang on a second. The whole of Europe is going through this, but none of them are dying because there's food. There's other foods available, but it's because you aren't allowing them to have this food that you're starving them to death. So they're going like, it's all right. It's not that bad. Shh, it's fine. It's fine. It's only the Irish, which is pretty much their sort of like ethos. The whole thing was it's fine. It's just Ireland. It's just the Irish people. So then on to Russell introduced a new program of public works that by the end of December 1846 employed some 500,000 Irish people and provided impossible to administer, because you've got 500,000 Irish people coming to work. You haven't got the systems in place to build up, and just like, what should we do for work? I don't know, just 5,000 people just coming at you. We want to work. I don't know. I have no idea. And so then we had a gentleman called Charles Trevelyan, who was in charge of the administration of government relief, limited to government's food aid program because of the firm belief of laissez-faire. So it's their fault. And this gentleman thought the judgment of God sent the calamity to teach the Irish a lesson. Many hundreds of thousands of feeble and starved men. According to Marshall, they were kept digging holes and breaking up roads, which was doing no service. So this needs to be confirmed, but they were making them do work that wasn't having any benefit. It wasn't affecting anyone. It wasn't helping anyone. It's just, yep, you do it, you're fine. And then in January 1947, so the famine's been going on for 3 years, 5, 6, 7 years, but coming up to 3 years now. So the government abandoned this policy. Good. Realising that it had failed, and it turned to a mixture of indoor and outdoor direct relief in the form of administration in workhouses through the Irish Poor Laws, the latter through soup kitchens, and costs of poor law fell primarily on the local landlords. And basically because of this, they attempted to reduce that. The landlords were going like, look, this has cost me too much money. I wanna be doing my own thing. And so they basically went to the poor serfs, get out my land. Nope, go. I'm not paying for you anymore. I don't care that you're here. Just get out my land. Not all landlords, but there were some who did and some who didn't, because some liked the people who looked after people on their land. There was one lord who, I believe he is the first lord of Clare, where I was born in County Clare, and apparently he looked after he was completely staunch anti-Catholic. And he pushed for the union of Ireland into the UK, but he looked after his own people pretty well, is what they say. But other people around, other people that was off his estates, he did not treat well. The other Catholics did not treat them well, but the ones on his land, he was all right with. So they're realizing their issues now. They're kind of going, we're kind of behind the ball now. But so in June 1947, the Poor Law Amendment Act was passed, which embodied the principle popular in Britain that Irish property must support Irish poverty. The landed proprietors in Ireland were held in Britain to have created the conditions that led to the famine. So basically, the people that were running Ireland were basically blamed, going, "It's your guys' fault that the Irish famine is happening." The point was raised in the Illustrated London News in February 1847. There was no law it would not pass at their request, and no abuse it would not defend them. So the Times reported that Britain had permitted in Ireland a mass of poverty, disaffection, and degradation without a parallel in the world. They allowed proprietors to suck the very lifeblood of that wretched race. So the last part is you can see that even though the Times are agreeing, well, actually no, that's quite right. So a wretched race, so a race that is literally starving to death, but that's not very good wording. So it's agreeing with the Irish side, saying that landowners are literally just taking everything they can, every little bit of piece, just out of the people, work them to death, and get as much money as they can before they die, basically. And then came a gentleman called William H. Gregory, who created the Gregory Clause of the Poor Law, and that prohibited anyone from owning that held at least 1/4 of an acre from receiving relief. In practice, this meant that if a farmer, having sold all his produce to pay rent and taxes, should be reduced, as many thousands of them were, to apply for public outdoor relief, he would not get it until he first delivered up all his land to the landlord. So he went, "No, I've got half an acre. Have half of that, so I can have a quarter, and then I can get some help." But then, of course, what you do is you're just going, "Yeah, this is yours. Take it." He would not. Yeah. So that is so, and this was what. So of this law, Mitchell wrote, "It is the able-bodied idler who is to be pauper came out. These factors combined in driving thousands of people off the land. So 90,000 people were off the land in 1849, and 104,000 people were out the year later. So it's a big migration. There's a lot of stuff going on right now. So then in 1849, the Encumbered Estates Act allowed landlords and estates to be auctioned off upon the petitions of creditors. So if the landlords were owing money to people, the creditors go, "Look, you got land in Ireland, you're going to sell it, and someone's going to buy it for the best price, and we're going to get our money back." Simple. So they were auctioned off at low prices. And then wealthy British speculators purchased land and took a harsh view on the tenants' farms, who continued renting. And then here's where it gets even worse. The rents were raised and the tenants were evicted to create large cattle grazing pastures. So between 49 and 54, 50,000 families were evicted. So you're talking anywhere up to 200 to 300 to 400,000 people were moved again. So see, you can see that the British aren't doing very much good right now. And this is something where I wanted to have a listen and see how much food this is. So through the entire period of the famine, Ireland was still exporting huge amounts of quantity of food to England. And the History of Ireland in 1997 they had a look at the facts and see how much food was actually being shipped out. So almost 4,000 vessels carried food from Ireland to the ports of Bristol, Glasgow, Liverpool and London during 1847, when 400,000 Irish men, women and children died of starvation in that year. So 4,000 boats loaded with food, different types of food, being shipped off to England when 500,000 people died. It's a massive atrocity. And so the food was shipped from some of the most famine-stricken parts of Ireland, so Ballina, Ballinshannon, Bantry, Dingle, Kilkee, Kilrush, Limerick, Sligo, Tralee, Westport, a lot of places. And as you can see on the map, there are, if you have a look on the map at the moment on the video, you can see different parts of where the population fell. So people are dying, people are leaving, people are abandoning Ireland. The young enough to get out, like they're going to England, they're going to America, Canada was a big one they went to. There was like some percentage of at the time. It was the Montreal saw there was 55% of the population were Irish. I think at the time they had 23,000 people living there, and it went up to 58,000 people at the time. Until there became laws around there because the British were worried about the Irish rising up in Canada and taking over Canada. So the Irish then went down to New York, Boston, a lot along the coast sort of thing, and they ended up there, which ended up being about 20% of the populations in those cities ended up being Irish. So big population. So these are some of the things that left Ireland during 1847. It included peas, beans, onions, rabbits, salmon, oysters, herring, lard, honey, tongues, animal skins, rags, shoes, soap, glue, and seeds. So that's just insane. And then it gets even worse. So everyone likes butter. Butter's good. You know, it's tasty. It's unhealthy for you, but you know it's good. So butter was shipped in a thing called firkins, each one holding about 9 imperial gallons. So this is 41 litres of butter. In the first 9 months of 1847, 56,557 firkins were shipped over to Ireland. This is equal to 2.3 million litres. 2.3 million litres were exported from Ireland to Bristol, and 34,852 firkins, which is equal to 1.426 million litres, were shipped to Liverpool, which correlates with 822,000 imperial gallons, which is 3.739 million litres of butter came from Ireland to England during the worst year of the famine. So it's like, yeah, we want your butter. We love your butter. It's great. We're just lathering ourselves in butter. Yes. Give us 3.5 million litres of the stuff. Why you're dying? It's fine. It's okay. So the problem was not a lack of food, as I'm sure you can tell. Food was not an issue. It was the price of food. So it was how much it cost per item, which was beyond the price of the poor. Hence why the poor were growing potatoes, because potatoes, you had a lot, didn't cost much. You have food. And the historian Cecil Woodham Smith wrote The Great Hunger of Ireland in 1845 to 1849 that no issue has provoked so much anger and embittered relations between England and Ireland as the indisputable fact that a huge quantity of food were exported from Ireland to England during a period where the Irish people were dying of starvation. So, and another person, John Regla, writes that Ireland remained a net exporter of food throughout most of the 5-year famine. So the 5 years of famine that's going on, Ireland's still sending off tons of food, hundreds of tons of food. And they both write, in addition to the maize imports, 4 times as much wheat was imported to Ireland at the height of the famine as exported. So there was wheat being imported. Now there is something we have to touch on, is the world community came together, and it's incredible to read how many people donated sums of money to help these people out. Now I will say the British government sent relief of £7 million, which sounds like a lot of money over the 5-year period. Now, £7 million of the 5-year period was 0.5% of their GDP. Which I know £7 million sound like a lot, but that's, in 1 year you're giving £1 to each Irish person that was living in Ireland at the time. It's not a lot of help. Like it's not, but these are quite interesting. So there was a lot of universal sentiment to the subject, because Irish people were dying in droves, like hundreds of people, thousands, tens of thousands, of course. So Ireland never asked for help from England. Like, the Irish people never did it. Like, even though they were starving to death, they still had their pride because of what Ireland had done to England. So at the moment that Ireland... Okay. So there is like there is some. So he said that the British press, and this would be Michael wrote in The Last Conquest of Ireland, perhaps, on the same subject, that no one from Ireland ever asked for charity during this period, and that it was England who sought charity on Ireland's behalf, and having received it, was also responsible for administering it. He suggested that it was being carefully incalculated by the British press that the moment Ireland fell into distress, she became an abject beggar at England's gate, and that she even craved alms for all mankind. He affirmed that in Ireland no one ever asked for alms or favours of any kind from England or any other nation, but that it was England herself that begged for Ireland. He suggested that it was England that sent round the hat all over the globe asking for a penny for the love of God to relieve the poor Irish. And consulting herself, the agent of all that charity took all the profit from it. So, getting all that help. I will give the money to the Irish people. I will do the work, of the charity based stuff. Sure, because at that time England, had been crushing it and taking over half the world at the time. Okay, so I want to get into a few of the facts about what was donated. So Calcutta is credited with making the first donation of £14,000, which in the 1840s is a lot of money. So it was raised by the Irish soldiers serving there and the Irish people employed by the East India Company. So, and then Pope Pius VI, I want to say, and the Russian Tsar Alexander II sent funds, and Queen Victoria donated £2,000, according to legend. I love that. And then one of the sultans of the Ottoman Empire, he originally offered to send £10,000, but he was asked by either the British diplomat or his own ministers to reduce it to £1,000. So this was to avoid over donating the Queen. Okay. And the US President James K. Polk donated $50, and Congressman Abraham Lincoln donated $10. Still pretty good. And then in addition to religious, non-religious organisations came to the assistance of famine victims. The British Relief Association was one such group, founded on the 1st of January 1847 by Lionel D. Rothschild. Interesting. And other prominent bankers and aristocrats. The association raised money throughout England, America and Australia. Their funding drives were benefited by a Queen's letter. A letter from Queen Victoria appealing for more money to relieve the distress in Ireland. With this initial letter, the association raised £171,000. And then in the second letter, they raised a total of altogether £390,000. So this is going good. But again, like England own Ireland. Like they are the country that Ireland is united with, and that Parliament is running. And they are getting assistance from other countries to help a country which they are effectively managing and running at the time. It's such a weird thing that 0.5% of £7 million was sent over 5 years. If they'd done 5%, 4%, or if they had donated, that's over 5 years. So 5 years. Every year, that's not a lot of GDP over 5 years, but but this is the discrimination against what they feel going on. And also we had our other host has just come back, so I'm going to patch her through. We should just be 2 seconds of that. We'll have her join us now. There we go, just letting you know that we're talking about the famine. Just got to sort this out. Okay. There we go. Okay. So yeah, so definitely, there's definitely some stuff going on here. And there's something I wanted to talk about, which was the emigration. Here we go. So this is a really there's a really interesting graph which I will actually download, and I will pop it up onto the stream so you guys can have a look at this as well. This is the flow rate of Irish people leaving Ireland and getting out of the country because of what's going on, basically. Here we go. There it is. Okay. So let's press OK for that. So there you go. I can't see it. Oh yeah, damn it. That's a shame. It's not. Oh yeah, that explains why. Okay, so let's just drop it down here. Now, okay, so she won't go to join us today, so that's fine. So as you can see here, we have in the prop it over here. So this is the Irish one. That's the European side, and that is the timescale there, sort of thing. So going back from the 1700s, you got your 1800s, you got 1860s, you got 1900s. Now around the time of the famine, the population has been growing, and then it starts to drop off, sort of thing. So around the 1940s, around the 1830s to 1850s, the population drops and goes down. And today we have only got, I think it's 4.7 million people living in Ireland in 2017. So as you can see, the population has never reached back up to where it was at that point. It's never gone back up to 9 million people. Like, we have a lot of other Irish people living around the world, as I'm sure you know. I think they estimate it to be around 100 million, but I think that's a bit extreme. But the actual country itself has never really recovered from the younger generation picking up shop and just leaving and just getting up. Nope, can't do this. We're starving. We have to go away to work, to eat, to save up money to send back home to get more of our family over, which is what they did. They were saying that that 1.4 million pounds was sent by Irish workers from abroad back home to get their family members on ships to sail with them to meet them there. But yes, as you can see, around that point, the Irish people start to leave. The Irish people start to pass away and die, and it's not so good, basically. And there we go. So as you can see, there are some major lasting effects going on here. There's some terribly bad stuff going on. And so yeah, so more than 100,000 Irish people sailed to Canada in 1847, and they estimate about 1 out of 5 died from disease and malnutrition on the trip over. But this flooded the Irish. So this flooded Toronto, were Irish, and 38,000 Irish flooded the city with fewer than 20,000 citizens living there already. And so all these cities had this sort of thing. So like Quebec, Montreal, Ottawa, Kingston, Hamilton, St. John also received large numbers. So basically, like St. John's was 55% were Irish natives or children of Irish-born parents. So unlike the United States, Canada couldn't close borders because Ireland was then a part of the UK, and Canada was owned by the UK. Well, part of it was. And the same with Australia, the same with New Zealand, same with parts of with South Africa. So they're going, you are a citizen of the Commonwealth, so yeah, you're welcome. And basically, what the British did, they placed harsh restrictions on Irish immigration to Canada after 1847, which resulted in more people moving down to the US then, because they're like, well, you're not letting us live here, right, we're going down to America. And they made up a quarter of the population in Boston, New York City, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and they became prevalent in some mining communities as well. So there is a big shift in people moving. It's not all to do with the famine. There was more people going, moving away since the end since when Napoleon was defeated in Waterloo, and 1845 and the Great Famine began. However, the worst famine emigration reached somewhere around 250,000 people in a year alone, which is a lot of people to ship and move and get out in one year. It's incredible. And with Western Ireland seeing the most immigrants, so Western Ireland, a lot of people leaving there, sort of thing. So as I was saying, the families did not emigrate everyone together, but the younger members of the family would leave. They would get there, they would start working, saving up, getting a place, sending money back to get more and more of their family going. and they say throughout the world history, women emigrated just as often just as early, and the same numbers as men did. So it wasn't just the men that were going; it was the women that were going as well at the same age. So yeah, so they sent back 1.4 million and 4,000 by 1851 back to the islands, which turned out to allow another member of their family to leave. So the immigration during the famine years of 1845 and 1850 was to England, Scotland, South Wales, North America and Australia. By 1851, about a quarter of Liverpool's population was Irish born. So again, you've got these mass influx of going into Ireland sort of thing. They had to be accepted because they're UK citizens. And they would use and to get to America, they used the well-established McCorkle line, is what it's called, sort of thing. So here we go. So we're gonna have a quick chat about the death toll. So as I said earlier, they didn't know exactly how many people died during the period because they had no register to go, this family lives here, these people live there, this is how many lives in this town, that's how many lives in this city, this is how many live in this countryside, in this county, in this in this dukedom. And so basically they just did a census talk in so with the eventual numbers in the 1850s, the census taken in 1841 recorded a population of 8.175 million. So again, in today's 2018, we have not recovered up to that number in Ireland. We're still at about 4.5 to 5 million. Like it's such a small, it's such a big gap nowadays compared to that sort of thing. So and they reckon after the famine, the counted was down to 6.5 million, a drop of over 1.5 million in 10 years. So the Census Commission has estimated that the normal rate of population increase, the population in 1851 should have grown to just over 9 million if the famine hadn't occurred. But it did. So they reckon that, here we go. So they reckon that they recorded 21,000 total deaths from the starvation in the previous decade and 400,000 deaths from diseases. Listed diseases were fever, diphtheria, dysentery, cholera, smallpox, and influenza. So those are the things I was talking about earlier. So the first two being the main killers of 222,000 and 93,000 people died. And the commissioners acknowledged that the figures were incomplete and that the true numbers were probably higher. And nowadays people reckon that we are looking at about 1 million to 1.5 million people had died during the famine sort of thing. And that and they reckon that 1 million people had fled Ireland basically. And this is this was something I wanted to say to you all, that the aftermath. So people getting married later. That wasn't what I want to talk about though. It was. Here we go. Where is it? There's a really interesting point that I want to bring up, sort of thing. Yeah, here we go. So contemporary opinion was sharply critical of Russell's government response to managing the crisis. I mean, you could tell that quite easily. From the start, there were accusations that the government failed to grasp the magnitude of the disaster. Sir James Graham, who had served as Home Secretary in Sir Peel's late government, wrote to Peel, in his opinion, that the real extent of the magnitude of the Irish difficulties was underestimated by the government. People were coming up and they're going, look, it's getting bad. We need to shut off the ports. We need to get food in. And they're like, no. It's fine. It's not that big of a deal. It's not that big of a deal. And they and one of the worst, well, not one of the worst things, but one of the pitiful things they did in 1849, the chief Poor Law Commissioners, Edward Twilson, resigned in protest over the Rate and Aid Act, which provided additional funds to the poor law through a 6p in the pound levy on all rateable properties in Ireland. So the comparatively trifling sums were required for Britain to spare itself the deep disgrace of permitting its miserable fellow subjects to die in starvation, because the Irish are English subjects. So Peter Gray, in his book The Irish Famine, the government spent £7 million for relief in Ireland between 1845 and 1850. And that was representative of less than 0.5% of the British gross national product over 5 years. So and the contemporaries noted that a sharp contrast with the £20 million given to West Indian slave owners in the 1830s. I'm just going to let that sink in there for a second. Ireland, with a population of 9 million people, that is a country that is, that's part of the Union of the UK, got £7 million. £20 million was given to the West Indian slave owners in the 1830s. It's not a very good track record for England, but I don't hear it being talked about very much, and I'm sure most people haven't heard it talked about much either, because it's not a very how to say it. It's not a very popular subject to bring up to kind of criticise a government which has probably done probably has one of the biggest atrocities. Not just Ireland. Like there are a lot more atrocities. You've got mass murders that have happened in Africa. You've got the government leaving India, and therefore 10 million people suffered and died there. So Ireland hasn't. So not Ireland, but what was I going to say? The British government hasn't got a very good track record in looking after people, unless it's themselves, and unless it's the rich selves as well. So to go along with that, there's a really good quote which I wanted to listen to, and it is. Other critics maintain that after the government recognised the scope of the crisis, it failed to take sufficient steps addressing it. John Mitchell, one of the leaders of the Young Movement, wrote in 1860, "Not done what they had done." Oh, that's noisy. If the English had not done what they had done. Oh, are we back? So yeah, there we go, and we're back. So I hope that last quote got back in. If not, I will say it again, just in case. So here it is again for you all. So a gentleman by the name of John Mitchell, one of the leaders of the Young Ireland Movement, wrote in 1860, "I have called it an artificial famine. That is to say, it was a famine which desolated a rich and fertile Ireland that produced every year abundance and superabundance, to sustain all her people and many more. The English indeed called the famine a dispensation of Providence, and ascribe it entirely to the blight on potatoes. But potatoes failed in like manner all over Europe." You don't like that, do you? Hello, 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 hello. Hello, 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 hello. We are having issues with the streams. Any issues, any issues. Hello. Wow. No? You don't like it? Come back to me, my stream. Okay, and we're back. Okay. Well, that's frustrating. Well, looks like we're good there. Okay. So, it was an ascribed entirely to the blighted potato, but potatoes failed like manner all over Europe. Yet there was no famine save in Ireland. The British account of the matter then is first a fraud, second a blasphemy. The Almighty indeed sent the potato blight, but the English created the famine. And that has real staying power, because if the English had not acted the way they had, the Irish would not have died, and the Irish would not have fled Ireland, and we would be looking at a very different country nowadays. You know, I don't know. It'd be very interesting. So, the question then comes on to: is this a genocide? Is this a murder against a people that had no way of, that was forced to control? And you have the failure of the potato crops in Ireland, the exportation of food crops and livestock, and the subsequent large-scale starvation. Whether or not it constitutes a genocide remains a historically and politically charged question. It's still there. It's still very much there in the minds of the Irish, because the Irish have had so much happen to them that it's atrocious. So, Francis A. Boyle, in 1996, a law professor at the University of Illinois, wrote a report commissioned by the New York-based Irish Famine Genocide Committee, which concluded that Britain's government deliberately pursued a race and ethnicity-based policy aimed at destroying the group commonly known as the Irish people, and that the policy of mass starvation amounted to genocide per the Hague Convention in 1948. So the U.S. state of New Jersey included the famine in the Holocaust and genocide curriculum for the secondary schools. So the state of New Jersey agrees that what the English did counts as a genocide, and yet it is very rarely talked about in England. It's very rarely talked about in most places outside of Ireland as well. From what I've seen with talking to people about it, sort of thing, they don't know a lot about it. So, the government's crimes, which deserves to blacken its name forever, was rooted in the effort to regenerate Ireland through landlord-engineered replacement of tillage plots with grazing lands. So they were forcefully getting rid of the Irish people so they could have crops going in to have cattle. So took precedence over obligation to provide food for its starving citizens. It is little wonder that the policy looked to many like a genocide. And then we have a gentleman by the name of James S. Donnelly Jr. wrote this book, Landlords and Tenants of the 19th Century Ireland, and he's in one of the extracts state, I would draw the following broad conclusion at a fairly early stage of the Great Famine. The government's abject failure to stop or even slow down the clearance, which is evictions, contributed in a major way to ensuring the idea of England's state-sponsored genocide in Ireland popular mind. Or perhaps one should say in the Irish mind, for this was a notion that appealed to many educated and discriminating men and women, and not only to the revolutionary minority. This is also my contention that while genocide was not in fact committed, is what he says, what happened during and as a result of the clearance had the look of genocide to a great many Irish. I mean, if you were there at the time, it would. Hello. And we're back, hopefully. Yes. Okay. Sorry about the delay, everyone. Internet was playing up a little bit. So I just wanted to say that, so here we go. So Michael wrote that an island which is said to be an integral part of the richest empire on the globe should in 5 years lose 2.5 million of its people, more than 1/4 by hunger and fever, the consequence of hunger, and flight beyond sea to escape from hunger. The period of potato blight in Ireland from 45 to 51 was full of political confrontation. A more radical Young Ireland group seceded from the repeal movement in July of 46 and attempted an armed rebellion in 48. It was unsuccessful. So yeah, this is what happens in history. This is what happens that people don't talk about, and it's it's not. It's, you know, that there are dark subjects that is very much just put to the side, and just you focus on the great things that England have done. If you're from England, I would like to encourage you to look more into it, to look more into the darker side that England has, because most countries do, and to what is done to probably the nearest country, and you know what negligence has done, and what a government that at the time saw Irish as a second-class citizen, which has been a big discrimination for the entire time. And I think this is something that still sits in the hearts of many Irish people today, and is not known by a lot of other people. It's not known by a lot of English people. It's probably known by more people who have been repressed, and they can understand the Irish plight, because a lot of people who were repressed donated and helped the Irish in their time of need. But yes, this is a small part of the Irish famine from a 10-year period. And I just want to shed some light on the matter today, because I've been reading about it today, and it's been a very interesting subject for me to learn more and to go a bit more deep depth about some of the lords and what some of the lords were like, and to see that there were some people that were kind of, this is an issue, we need to fix this. Some that were going, nope, ignore it, it's fine, it's just the Irish. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, and humanoids of all ages, thank you for stopping by for a guidebook to nowhere, and I do hope you enjoyed, and we shall see you on Monday at 6:30 p.m. Thank you very much for stopping by.